Hi. So, are you frustrated with living in a joint family? Is it causing you a lot of unhappiness in life? Well, today I'm going to talk about whether joint families are a good idea or not. If you're living in one and very unhappy, what can you do? And today I'll share a personal story from my life because originally I also came from a joint family. So, seeing joint family up and close, I can confirm that sometimes joint families can be hell. And this is not just confirmed by my own family, I have observed the same thing in countless other families. Family members who are supposed to love one another, they actually end up hating each other. Forget closeness and intimacy, they become each other's biggest enemies. So, despite every family member having really good intentions, why does this happen? Why do some joint families end up becoming hell? There are actually many reasons. Some of the major ones are there is a lot of joint decision making. It's like there is one kitchen and there are multiple ladies, let's say, if they are handling the kitchen. There is one living room, like how are you going to set it up? How much cleanliness is required in the house? What are we going to cook for today? What kind of a celebration are we going to do for Diwali? Whether children should go out to play or not? There are just so many decisions on an everyday basis. And since there are multiple people, there are multiple opinions and there are clashing opinions because everyone cannot have their own way. So for example, if you have to decide what color should the wall be, everybody cannot have their own way. Somebody may say wallpaper, somebody may say solid paint. 10 people, 10 different opinions. And those lead to clashes. Another big reason obviously is just mismatching personalities. Sometimes people living in a joint family are simply too different. And that could happen actually between two brothers also, or it could happen between the daughter-in-law and the mother-in-law. Since the personalities are so different, the way they interact with each other can lead to so many fights and disharmony. One person wants everything peaceful and quiet. The other person wants everything high energy. Let's go out, let's do something together. Noise, music, all of those things. This could lead to clashes. One person wants everything organized, the environment to be very clean and pretty. The other person is laid back and they don't care that much. Then that can lead to clashes. One person, when they talk to the other person, they are very authoritative. They want to take control. But the other person is very sensitive. They cannot give control. There can be ego clashes. Sometimes there are differences because they are unable to understand each other's emotions. So those lead to differences, etc. I also did a survey on Facebook where I asked people to share their problems with joint families. I'll give you some examples from that too. People say that there is a lack of privacy. Then there is lack of freedom. Like we cannot make our own decisions, like I discussed earlier. You have to constantly seek approval from authority members. And authority members, they place restrictions on you. Like you're always monitored by others. You can't just be yourself. You sometimes can't even wear clothes of your own choosing. Then someone said that there are different attitudes towards members earning differently. Like if you're earning more, maybe you'll be respected more. And one person who doesn't earn that much, they might not be given that much importance. Then there is constant interference by other family members. Then people taking sides during conflicts instead of being fair. The couple doesn't get any time for each other. They have to constantly do things with the family. Overall, there's just this lack of space and boundaries also. And sometimes all of those things that I just mentioned are present in one family. So imagine the absolute disaster that family can become. So if you are living in a joint family and you are really unhappy, what should you do? What are the options? One obvious option that comes to mind is go live in a nuclear family. But that's not so easy, is it? And it's not like nuclear families are perfect either. They come with their own pros and cons. And it's also not like joint families are all bad. Joint families have some benefits too. So for example, in joint families, it's easier to actually raise children because there is much more support. Children also remain closer to their grandparents. The couple can actually leave, go on a trip without worrying about the children. Children get a lot of playtime with their cousins. So technically, raising children is actually better in a joint family. Then there are financial reasons. Sometimes when you live in a joint family, you actually save on a lot of things. First of all, you save on rent. You can have a joint car. When you order things, you can order them in bulk. The maids that come to your house, they can actually clean for the whole family. So people who are poorer, they sometimes actually don't have the option of having a separate nuclear house. They sometimes have to live together for financial reasons. And also not everybody in every joint family is sad and unhappy. Like I know of joint families which are actually functional, people who are actually happy. In fact, in my Facebook survey, I found out that many families, many people would simply not choose a nuclear family over joint one. Like despite the problems, they would still want to continue to live in joint families, and all power to them. So my core point is that overall, if you see more benefits of living in a joint family, then go ahead. But today my focus is on people who are living terrible lives in joint families and still are unable to find any solution. To these family, I would say that I understand that leaving a joint family is not easy. It's almost like a divorce. It's almost like a breakup. There are just so many things involved. It's scary also. Like, how do you just go on and live on your own when you have had that support all your life, where so many things were taken care of by the family as a whole, and now you have to take care of everything, and then you may be disappointing so many people and they would really stop you. How do you overcome that resistance also? So leaving joint families is not easy, but sometimes it's very, very important. So many people continue to stay in joint families for bad reasons. You know what are bad reasons? One of the worst reasons that you can stay together is, what will other people think of us? Log kya kahenge? If you're forcing your family members to stay together so that you can have a good societal image, that's a terrible, terrible choice. Please remember, the society does not have much time to think about you. They are troubled and worried about their own lives. You have to take care of your own life from morning to evening. You have to create a house which is peaceful and harmonious. Just because somebody somewhere might say, oh, look at them, or they're all living together, is that worth all the misery that you're putting yourself through? And this is also fake. Like, you're putting on a face. You go out and you smile, oh, everything is fine, everything is great. And then you come back home and you go to your room and just live in frustration. After a long day's work, you come back home only to find out that, oh, now there are 4 different issues to resolve. Now we're going to have 5 different fights, or we're simply going to stay mad or angry with one another. Is this all worth it? So please be real with yourself. You don't need to fake happiness in front of the society. You can accept the fact that, okay, we are a lot of different personalities. We can't always get along together. So it's okay. We can separate. We can live in different houses. We can have different kitchens. It's completely fine to accept your own reality. Another bad reason for staying in a joint family is that, oh, we are respecting adults. This is not the way to respect them. Respecting your elders means that you talk to them, you give them time, you listen to them, you take time to understand them. When they need you, you go and help them. You care for them, you give them your attention, your love. That's what respect means. You actually value them. You admire them. When they give their opinion, you give it consideration. Respect does not mean taking orders from them. Respect does not mean that keeping them authority over your life for the rest of your life, even when you are adults. Like, I've seen men who are in their 50s but are still afraid of their own fathers. There are so many couples out there who have their own children, but they cannot take decisions for their own life because their own parents govern their lives. And they think, oh, by listening to them, by agreeing with whatever they say, by complying with them, they are respecting them. No, that's not respect. That's just toxic. And in the long run, it leads to resentment. I don't understand how people are adding more and more items in the definition of respect. Like, if respect is that important to you, why don't you respect your parents even more? Like, before going to the bathroom, why don't you ask your parents? That's respectful, isn't it? Before deciding what to eat, golgappa or tikki, why don't you call your parents and ask permission? That's respectful, isn't it? Like, before taking a deep breath, why don't you just ask them, Mom, is that a good idea? Like, is that respectful too? How far are you going to stretch the definition of respect? How many items will you fit in there? So please remember, when you are an adult, you do not have to comply with anybody to show respect. That's not how respect works. So what's the ideal solution here? So I'm coining a new term today that could explain the whole concept really well. So what you have understood is, both joint families and nuclear families, like, both of them have their own pros and cons. So you don't have to particularly choose either. We can keep the best of both. And for that, I am coining a new term which I call neighborhood family. So not a joint family, not a nuclear family, neighborhood family. By neighborhood family, I mean all the couples in the family, they don't live in the same house, but they live in apartments, or they live in houses nearby one another. So each of them have their own independent space, but it's just right adjacent or very near to other family members. And sometimes this can happen in one house on different floors also. In some cases, it will be separate houses if you can afford it. And in some cases, it can be separate apartments in one society. In this way, you can have the best of both worlds. Now, I understand that for some people, it's simply not possible because of financial reasons. And for some people, only nuclear family is a choice because they are working outside, far away in some other town. So this neighborhood family simply cannot happen. But for many people, it is possible, but they don't do it. I know so many examples of people who are rich, who really have the money, and they're building a new house. They have the option that the couples can have a separate floor, but they won't do it. Why? Because we have to have a common kitchen. For so many people, having a common kitchen is somehow the most sacred thing that they can do in the house. They cannot stand the idea of food being cooked in two separate kitchens. What is this? Kitchen is supposed to give you calories. Kitchen is there for your survival. How does it matter if those calories are coming from two different rooms in the house? Just because you have two different kitchens does not mean that you have to have every meal separately as well. You can actually have rituals where you eat together also. But having your own space is so important. But so many people completely ignore this. They go on to make a fully joint house. They don't give people separate floors. Multiple couples are living on the same floor. They have the same kitchen. Their goal was to have a happy, intimate family. But the reality is that now people don't want to see each other's faces in the morning. They wanted that everybody would stay together like friends. But now the reality is that their day is ruined if they see their faces in the morning. So if you're making a new house, or if you have an option financially to have separate houses nearby one another, please go for that. It's the best of the both worlds, because this way you can stay together. You can stay close to the older parents. You can take care of them. You can keep meeting them. You can keep making plans together. Children can go to each other's houses. Children can still play with their cousins. But now you also have boundaries. Now you also have space. Now you can be yourself. Now the couple can get private time. Now the decisions won't clash from morning to evening. And now I'll come to the story that I wanted to share about my own life. We went through quite a turmoil in our own house. So in 1988, 1 year before I was born, we made a huge palatial house in our hometown, Hanumangarh. This was made by my dad and my uncle. For that time, it was one of the best houses in the town, and it was like a dream house. We would all live happily ever after. But as they all started to live together, in a couple of years, my dad found out that this is not working out. There are constant fights and resentment and friction between the members. Like, every day you have to sit down and resolve something, and it does not get resolved. One fight leads to another fight. You want to talk about it, that leads to then another fight. And there's simply no peace and harmony in the house. So my dad started to question things like, is that how I want to live the rest of my life? Is this the environment that I want to raise my children in? So he decided that now I want a separate space. So he first proposed to the family was that let's make two separate floors. These floors will be completely independent from one another. Both of those floors will be complete in their own way. They'll have their own kitchens, their own guest room, and a child's room. So basically independent units. But the rest of the family completely disagreed. They hated the idea of that separation. It went against their image of a family unit. They were very mindful of what will people think about us. So they did not allow my father. He tried for a couple of years to make that happen, and he kept telling them, if you don't allow me to have a separate floor in the house, I will have to move out. And they said, you can move out, but we will not partition this house. It's almost like Gandhiji telling British people that please don't make a partition. So my dad tried everything but did not succeed, and ultimately he did decide to move out. And from that palatial house, from that dream house, my mom, my dad, me and my brother, 4 of us moved out to a small, old, dilapidated ancestral house. So for that time, if the big house was 5 stars, the house that we moved to was just 2 stars. But my dad prioritized peace and harmony over that house. After taking that decision, my grandmother, she stayed mad at my father for 6 months. In fact, more than that. And this was the first time he experienced something like that, like his mom being angry at him for such a long period, because it was a trauma for them. They could not have imagined something like this. In that time, joint families were the norm. Today, nuclear families are much more acceptable. In 1988, it was not. But it was the best decision that my dad could take. Because in a very short period of time, the relationship of my mom with my uncle's wife, that actually improved dramatically. They became friends again. They now started going to the market together. They were happy to invite one another. They were happy to sit down and talk because all the fights were taken away. So the love, the intimacy that we were hoping for actually started after this separation. So please think about this. What are your goals? If your goal is happiness and intimacy, then these neighborhood families are much better. By the way, the house that we moved to, it was probably just 100 meters from the original house. So we were practically just neighbors. Throughout our childhood, we kept hopping to the other house to play with our cousins, to be with our grandparents. So it never even felt like we were in a different house because it was just so accessible. So we had the best of the both worlds. So if you can make that happen, please do it. It's one of the best things you can do for your family. And other than this physical separation, there are a few more things that you can do. These are more psychological in nature. First is, please understand that you don't have to respect elders. You have to respect everybody. The elders also need to respect the younger ones. No exception. Nobody gets a pass. Just because you were born a few years early on this earth does not give you a right to disrespect anybody. Everybody has to respect everyone. And this is especially true for the daughter-in-law, because in India, it's quite common that the daughter-in-law is supposed to adjust to the family. The daughter-in-law is supposed to make compromises. The daughter-in-law is supposed to fit into the culture. This very idea means that you're putting the daughter-in-law at a lower status than the family. Why are we not giving them equal right to bring their own culture in the house and influence the culture of the house? Yeah, and if there are two daughter-in-laws, both of them are allowed to influence the culture equally. And whatever heterogeneous mix comes out of it, that's fine, but at least the status is equal, and that's very crucial. So any adult living in the house must not feel that they are inferior to anybody or they are lower in status or lower in hierarchy. All of you are equal, and if the daughter-in-law has to compromise, so does the mother-in-law. Another thing that you can do is have as much clarity about money as possible. If possible, separate your expenses, because otherwise that also leads to a lot of resentment, because somebody would spend more than the other person and they would feel that it's unfair. So have good clarity about expenses and have separate accounting if possible. Then another very important idea is each couple, they have their own independent decision making, that they are the final authority on their own decisions. You can of course influence one another, but they can take their final decision. So for example, if New Year comes and one couple says that we have been celebrating New Year's together for last 5 years. This year we want to do something different. Both of us want to go out on a trip other than the family. They must be allowed to do that. If one couple decides that our children are going to go to a different school, then it's their choice. If one couple decides that they are going to come late to the house and wake up late in the morning, it's their choice. And these are some things that you need to do even if you're living in a joint family or a neighborhood family or a nuclear family. I know I tried to cover a lot of brief points in this. Today, I just wanted to address the larger picture. So if you want me to address any of those topics in detail, please let me know in the comments. I'll make another detailed video specifically on that. Also, I really want you to click on the bell icon. Understand this, if you like my content and if you want YouTube to send you the next video of mine, subscribing is not enough. YouTube only sends my next video to a very handful of subscribers. And that's why if you really want to be notified, you have to hit the bell icon, then YouTube will notify you every time. Also, you can tell me in the comments, what do you think are the pros and cons of living in a joint family? I would love to hear from you. That's it. Thanks for listening to my videos. But if you are dealing with complex issues and your problems are deep-rooted and very painful, then I suggest you should go for counseling. You can find somebody on your own or you can come to us. We now have a team of counselors. So even if I'm unable to work with you personally, you can trust our counselors. They work very hard to help you. You can find our counseling application form in the YouTube description or on our website www.shridharlifeschool.com.